All right, that looks good. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Embroidery Basics. Hope everybody's doing good today. Welcome and thanks for coming on Saturday. How many of you have signed on? Oh, good. So we have quite a few people signed in already. Thank you all for showing up today. This is something I kind of wanted to do because sometimes I have questions about the basics of embroidery, and also I know a lot of you may be new to embroidery, so I want to make sure that you're going to have the best success with your embroidery. So I thought, well, why not do some embroidery basics? And I'm basing this off of a class I teach at the shop I work at, and it is an embroidery basics class. And about an hour or so ago, I posted up a file for you guys, and these are the notes that we go over in that class. Now, I know it says baby lock, and if you don't own a baby lock, don't worry about that, because the basics go for any machine. This is just a guideline for you, so don't feel discouraged if I'm not using your machine. It doesn't matter, because there's so many great brands out there of embroidery machines, but that's not all that you need for embroidery. You need threads, you need stabilizers, you need, the correct hoops, you need everything to go along with it. It is called a recipe. So I want to go over a lot of that recipe for you, and it'll make you more successful in your embroidery venture. Now, there are some really deep topics that I probably won't get into, and so, I am going to go into stabilizers, but I'm not going to go super deep into them, because there's a lot of great sources out there, and we'll talk about that when we get to stabilizers. So so I'm trying something new with my camera here, with my phone camera. And what I'm doing is I have the screen facing away from me, so that way when I hold something up, you can actually read it going the right way. Yay! However, I have my iPad over here, so that's why you see me keep looking over here, because I'm looking for questions or anything like that. And it's a little tricky, so just bear with me. If I don't see your question right off the bat, don't worry. I'll scroll back through and get to it. Sometimes I get sidetracked. I'm talking about something and I see a question and I want to answer it right then and there. So if I don't get to it, don't worry. I'm going to scroll back through. Scroll back through and get to your question. So I'm just going to check really quickly here, just to make sure you all can hear me. No one's saying they can't hear me. So that's good. All right, great. Okay. So if you happen to have printed out the file that I posted earlier, this is just a guide. And I'm going to go through everything. And if you're just joining on, don't be discouraged if you don't have a baby lock. It's actually okay, because you're going to use this recipe as well. And I'm going to kind of follow this. Of course I veer off, because that's what I do. I have an attention span of a pea. So, but these are basically not rules by any means, because everybody does something different. And when it comes to teaching and what I do, I'm going to show you the way that I do it, and the most successful way I do it. That means that by no means am I the end all be all. We all learn from each other. I learn things from you guys, so I take that information and incorporate it. So if you're watching another embroiderer and they tell you to do something a little different, try out both ways and see which way works best for you. So that's a great thing about sewing. We're always learning from each other, and there is not anybody out there that knows exactly everything. So this is just a guide. So when we're talking about embroidery, and especially if you're new to embroidery, this is a separate part, completely separate from your sewing aspect. And a lot of us have combination machines, and there's a lot of us that have single embroidery machines. There's some of us that have multi-needle embroidery machines. They all work pretty much the same. You are going to take whatever material you're using. You're always going to use a stabilizer. You're going to use some embroidery thread. You're going to use an embroidery needle. Make sure there's a bobbin in the bobbin case. And you're going to hoop it and push start and go. And that's basically embroidery in a nutshell. But there are so many different types of embroidery. There's embroidery where it's just mainly stitching. There's embroidered quilting. There's, ooh, I should have grabbed everything. There's freestanding lace, like my little butterflies here. This is a beautiful Zandra Shaw design. So see my freestanding butterflies. There's applique. So there's embroidered applique. There is all kinds and types and all kinds of stuff out there. There's even combinations of that. So maybe kind of like a freestanding applique. Sounds weird, doesn't it? But that's okay. This is a cute little design from Kimberbell, but what you can see is half of it is on the fabric and half of it's hanging off. So there's so many different types. Let's see. There's in the hoop projects, like the ones I teach you guys to make a lot. And we use our IQ designer to build it. But there's so many great in the hoop projects out there. I was going to see if I had anything around, and no, I don't see anything close to me. But in the hoop projects are so much fun to make. Now, those of you who've watched the mug rug video, how cute is she? I made this the other night, and I just couldn't, I had to show you all this. This is a built-in design. This little geisha is a built-in design on my Solaris, and she is darling, so I have to brag. This is my favorite mug rug ever. So, also I wanted to let you know that I will be finally posting those directions for the IQ Designer mug rug. So, let's see, I'll probably post them tomorrow for you. So, yeah, so there's all kinds of embroidery. Now, materials, you can embroider on almost anything. Seriously. You can embroider on fabric. We can embroider on jersey material. We can embroider on that slick material, like the workout shirts and stuff like that. We can embroider on cork. Love cork. And I am working on a private class with this cork piece right here, so stay tuned for that. So cork. You can embroider on book bags. You can embroider on bags. You can embroider on canvas. I mean, it's just like the world is your oyster when it comes to embroidery. It's just learning the techniques, but it's also learning proper stabilization, because that is the most important part of embroidery, is the stabilization. Let's see, where are we at? Okay, so I don't know if y'all could hear that, but my phone started to ring right during the middle of this. So, if we're looking at our guideline, our great little guideline right here, what I start with always is threads and bobbins. And threads are really important to embroidery. And why is that? Because specific threads are made for embroidery, because they're made for the speed of the machine, because remember, the machine is going super duper fast, and you need a thread that can hold up for that. So what types of thread that is ideal for embroidery is an embroidery polyester thread or an embroidery rayon thread. They make different types. There's lots of threads out there. They can be made in 40 weight or 60 weight. Let me grab some 60 weight. So the 40 weight, and when we're thinking about threads, the weight of the thread is kind of confusing, because if you're using a 40 weight thread, or you have a 40 weight thread, and you have a 60 weight thread, guess which one's thicker? It goes down. So that can be confusing. So a 40 weight thread is actually thicker than a 60 weight thread. And if I had a really great zoom capability, I would show you the difference. But what a regular 40 weight embroidery thread is for all general embroidery. And again, you can use polyester or rayon. Now, what are the differences in that? Well, did I even put that on here? Let me see. I'm just curious if I put that on here. It's been a while since I've read this. So a polyester thread is the one that I use all the time. And because I worked in an actual embroidery shop, we use that mostly because it's really strong. It's a little shinier. It will not bleed. So sometimes you have threads that bleed. This will not bleed, or it will not bleach out. So that's pretty much the one that I use the most of. Now, if you're going to use a rayon threads are great. They're strong. They're not, some of them aren't as shiny. However, what they're good for, they are great for if you're going to do what we call burning out of the hoop. And what that means is you take a little heat tool and you can go around your freestanding lace and burn it out of the stabilizer. Because the rayon thread won't melt, but polyester thread will melt. And honestly, I don't have any rayon thread. I don't really use it. I need to get some, because there's some great projects like the Zandra Shaw projects. Freestanding projects definitely call for the rayon thread, and you definitely want to use those, especially if you're doing her flowers or something like that. I even could have used them on the butterflies. However, I generally just use a regular polyester. Now, there's different types of polyester, of course. There are many brands, and some of them I'll mention to you. There's Floriani, there's Embellished Threads, there's Isacord, there's Robison Anton, there's the Brother Threads, there are, let's see if any of them, Metler, there are all kind of great threads out there. And I do suggest, just like in anything else you do in life, you do want to buy the best quality that you can. I do discourage buying a cheaper brand. And I hate to say that, but you know I am against buying off the big A. So you're not really sure what you're getting. And sometimes those threads can cause a little more breakage, and you might have a little bit more trouble. But when you pick a thread that is through a company that's reputable, they have spent all the money, the time, and the research on their threads to make sure that you have the best embroidery experience. So that's why I totally support those brands. And a lot of them will have some fun things. So if I'm looking at a Floriani thread, it's really, really shiny. So I like the Floriani thread because I like really, really shiny thread. Now, if I look at an Isacord thread, which, let me see if I have one around here. Oh, let me grab my spool. If I'm looking at my Isacord thread, it's not as shiny, but it's not flat. So it's really, really nice if you don't want all that shine in your embroidery. It's a really beautiful, strong thread. And then, so those are the 40 weights. Well, let me jump onto one more 40 weight. And then there's some 40 weights that I really love because they are a coated polyester and it gives it that matte look like this. So I'm not sure if you can tell, but this almost looks like cotton. So it's really nice. I really like this because this is a really fun one to do, especially on like those vintage designs. Like you want to do something on a pure white linen tablecloth and you want it to look like handwork. These are gorgeous for this. And this is by Embellish. So, love this. I have every color because I just had to have it all. The next one is a 60 weight. So I'm jumping on from a 40 weight to a 60 weight. And the deal with a 60 weight is this is great for those very fine designs. So maybe red work, maybe, something that just has some real delicacy to it, some lace. Oh, this is great for freestanding lace. But also what this is great for is tiny lettering. Because when we have a 40 weight thread for teensy tiny lettering, sometimes it gets a little bulky. And sometimes you can't really read the letter. But if you use a 60 weight thread, you'll be able to read that letter and it comes out perfect. So I love this. And this is actually embellished 60 weight thread. And where do you find these threads? The best place to get them from is from a retailer. So I know there's a lot of retailers around that carry Isacord, Floriani, Metler, Robinson Anton, and Embellish. And you can go to their websites and there's always find a store. So you type in either your zip code or your town. But if you don't have one close to you, you can find stores that are selling them and they will be happy to ship them to you. And remember, when you're doing that, you're helping small business. So that's what keeps me alive and a lot of you who have small businesses alive. So make sure to check those out. It's a lot of fun. So I'm just going to look over here and make sure I don't have any questions so far. Oh, let me tap here. Comments on. Okay, so having a hard time to hear me today. Let me get you a little bit closer to you. I'm trying to yell at you, and what the difference is I'm trying something a little bit different here. Okay. Otherwise, I'll have to put on my microphone, and sometimes that gets a little annoying. Let's see. Alexis, that's a great question. So Alexis asked, I noticed small lettering. You will see the bobbin thread come up through the top thread. There's a couple different things that you want to do there. So a 60 weight thread, yes, definitely. And you may want to use a smaller needle, like a 75 needle. Try that. And we're going to talk about needles here in a moment. But yes, that should totally help that. What about exquisite thread? You know, I've heard good things about exquisite, so yeah, if it works good for your machine, go for it. Yeah, I haven't used it before, but you have your speaker to the highest. Well, I might have to put my microphone on then. So why don't we do this? I want to see if everyone can hear me okay, or do I need to be a little louder? I'm going to give you a moment to think about that. And if I need to be, okay, you have your speaker on high also. Let me grab my microphone and let's see if that helps. Since I've got my camera kind of in a different position, it may be that. So, all right. Some people hear me fine, and I'm okay. Okay, well, we're going to to try the microphone. If it gets too crispy, meaning annoying, then I'm going to take it off. Okay, give me a second. Let me go grab my microphone. All right, I had to go find my adapter, which was in my car. So 1 second. Okay, I need a test. I need to make sure you guys can hear me with my microphone on, and let me know. So I'm just going to check really quickly. And this microphone, yeah, and that's the thing with this microphone. It does sound kind of crackly. So we're just going to have to go with it. Let me see, maybe I could turn it down a little bit. Because normally I don't have this problem where y'all can't hear me without the other. Okay, so we're going to try this, and again, my voice may be a little annoying, and I apologize. However, since some of you can't hear me, I'd rather have the microphone on. Okay. Renee, that's funny. Hey, I told you I was going to get my microphone. Okay. All right, so let's get back to it. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the question was a moment ago. Let me come back up here because I saw about the 60. Okay, so Kathy asked, did I recommend a 70 or 75? A 75 needle. So a 90 would probably be a little too big for that 60 weight thread. So I would go ahead and use a 90, or excuse me, a 75 with that. Okay, so, okay, let's talk about that. We're going to jump down a little bit and go to bobbin thread. Okay, so bobbin thread, ideally, is what you want to use in the bobbin area of your machine. Now, it is up to your machine which size to use. So there is 60 weight, and there's 90 weight, there may be an 80 weight, there may be 100 weight. And generally inside of your directions or somewhere like that, you want to use that specific weight. And so in my Meridian, it likes me to use a 90 weight. And in the Solaris, I can use a 60 weight. Now, have I interchanged those?
And I'm going to be honest, yes, I have. So I haven't had many problems, but that doesn't mean I'm right. So you're just going to kind of test it out and see what works for yours. So there is the finishing touch. The Baby Locks love the finishing touch. There's also a brand called Bottom Line that was designed by the wonderful Libby Lehman. And that does work. And I believe, gosh, I want to say that's an 80 weight. That works really good. Now, this is me. I do not like to use pre-wound bobbins. I don't generally like the thread that comes on them. But if you want to, you can. But there's a couple rules that I want you to follow when you do that. So, if you're going to use a pre-wound bobbin, make sure that it is the exact size for your machine. And for our machines, the Baby Locks, that is a class 15 for our embroidery machines. If you're on a multi-needle, I will be honest with you, I change up. I actually go, okay, I can use a pre-wound on my 6 needle, but I use a magnetic one. And the reason why I use those is because we don't have bobbin winders on our multi-needles. So those are specifically made for that machine. So I'm happy to use it for that. But for my flatbeds, I am not using it. However, if you want to, please do. But make sure it's the exact size. The other thing you need to know about a pre-wound is if you buy a box of pre-wound class 15 or whatever fits your machine, never, ever, 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 ever reuse the plastic bobbin. Throw it away. I know it seems wasteful, but do you want your machine healthy or unhappy? So the thing about those bobbins are they're very flimsy and they break easily. So imagine you're sewing along and something happens and that bobbin shatters inside of your bobbin case, and it can cause all kind of problems. You know, my idea is, do I want to take my machine in or do I want to keep on embroidering? I want to keep on embroidering. Now, if you are using a Baby Lock or a Brother machine, let me find my little piece here. And it's gone, of course. Maybe it's in my box here. This is where the microphone probably gets a little annoying. So hold on one second, guys. Okay. So if you have either a Baby Lock or a Brother machine, there is a little tool that is included into your accessories, because there are some pre-wound bobbins that are a class L. Class L. L like love. And what you need to do, because that is a shorter bobbin, you want to take and drop this guy right here. And let me kind of just get a good zoom in on it. Let me see. You want to take this guy, drop it directly into the bobbin case, and then you'll put your bobbin on top of it. And what that does is it raises the bobbin up. And generally those bobbins are on like paper bobbin, and of course you'll throw that away. We know that, yeah, right. So you just take and drop it on there, and it's going to raise it to the correct height. Now, why is that important? Because when you use the correct bobbin, all your tensions are going to be perfect down in the bobbin case. If you use a bobbin that's shorter, it's having that much more. It doesn't seem like it would have an effect, but it would have that much more trouble trying to get through the tensions because it's coming up and over versus just over. So that's what I suggest for pre-wounds. If you're going to do it, just take some precautions. The other thing I suggest people to do if you've got a pre-wound is go ahead and remove some of the thread off of it because they're too full. If we fill our bobbins on our machines, do you notice they don't fill them all the way up? that's because it works better when you don't have that bobbin bulging. So I would remove maybe about an eighth, or maybe, well, let me do it in percentage, maybe about 10% of it. So, and then put it in. So, yeah. So any questions on that? Let me check here. Yeah, Ernestine, I do too. I just keep my bobbins wound. One time you said there was a difference in color between rewound and regular. Pre-wound and there's a difference in color? I don't remember saying that. So maybe clarify that question just a little bit. Let me see. Let me go back. Bonnie, clarify that for me. I don't know if I understand. Where do I find the lift? The lift, I'm not sure what you mean, Dory. So give me a little more clarification there for me. Oh, I was probably saying the bobbin case. There are some bobbin cases that have, okay. So, some of the bobbin cases have like, or excuse me, the bobbins itself will have like a bluish tint. And I know that seems weird. Like the baby lock bobbins, if you hold it up to a pre-wound bobbin, the bobbin itself, number one, will look thicker, and number two, it's so vague you can barely see it. It'll have almost like a bluish tint to it, and like I said, it's very vague, but if you kind of hold it up to the light, you're like, oh, I see what she's talking about. So that's, yeah. But these are hardier, and the pre-wounds are very thin, very, very thin, because, you know, of course they're making them in mass, and so to cut down cost, and that's what all companies do, right? Okay, tap one more time to take a look, make sure I'm getting your questions. Found it. Okay. All right, so yeah, that's what I do. I do the same thing that Ernestine said. I just go ahead and wind bobbins and just get them wound. And even while I'm embroidering, I just go in, because on a lot of machines you can wind while you're sewing. So go ahead and just get those taken care of. And then you've made your own pre-wound bobbins. And the great thing about a lot of the bobbins, now there are some companies out there that their bobbins are really expensive. I will tell you that you are not supposed to use any type of pre-wound if you own a Bernina machine. That's a big no-no. Big no-no. But you can pre-wind all your bobbins and just get them ready. And that's exactly what I do. Okay, so I'm going to jump back up to needles. So let's talk about needles. Needles are so important in any type of sewing. And you know there are a million type of needles out there, and it's like, good gracious, what do I do? Well, when it comes to embroidery, luckily the needles are just labeled embroidery. And that makes things so much easier. So you do want to find needles that actually say embroidery. So these are the Class A needles. I really like these. Really, I found out that and I like Schmetz too, but these work great on the baby lock machines, especially with the threaders. It seems to thread every single time on these. Now, every now and then, if I'm using a small Schmetz, like I don't know, like a 70 or 65 or something like, or 60 or something like that, I might have a little harder time, or a Microtex, I might have a little harder time with the threader, but it seems like the Class A's, they work great with that. But they're a great needle anyways. So Schmetz, Class A, Oregon needles. Oregon needles have Oregon has great embroidery needles. So you can try those and see what works best for you. Now, when it comes to needles, you know, the number one question is how often do I change it? Oh, you know, that question is such a double-edged sword, because I want to tell you what I do is I do it after every 2 bobbins. or depending on what I'm working on. But this is what is suggested by universally, just suggested. Change the needle at the beginning of each new embroidery or after 4 to 6 hours of use or every 50 to 70,000 stitches. So sometimes that's hard to kind of keep up with, but it kind of just depends on what you're doing. And this is just a guideline for you. So I probably change mine too soon. So that means I spend more money. However, I'm really, once I can almost hear, and you'll almost hear it, you'll almost hear when it's time to change the needle, because it goes thump, 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 versus the that we're used to, the pretty sound. So you'll get a thumping noise. And that's definitely time to change the needle. Now, I have to admit, since I work at a store, that we see a lot of, we service machines, we see a lot of machines come in, and people aren't taught about changing the needles at all, and we'll ask, okay, when did you last change your needle? Well, it's never been changed. And generally that is one of the top 3 problems if something is happening with your machine. So we go through 3 things on our machine before we even take it in to see if there is really something wrong with your tensions or that. Number 1 is rethread the top, rethread the bobbin, and then change the needle. And that usually fixes everything. Really weird, but it really does work. So what size needle do I use? Well, for most embroidery, you can get away with a 7511 embroidery needle. Now, if you're going to be doing going through thicker fabrics, or maybe even doing in the hoop projects because you're going through multiple layers, you can use a 90 needle. So it just kind of depends on what you're working on. So think about this. So the thicker the fabrics, the larger the number. The thinner the fabrics, the smaller the number. However, you can use a smaller needle for stitch intensive designs. So it's just kind of a give and take. If that needle is not working for you, switch it out and try a different size. That's how I've learned. So hopefully, let's see, where did I get that? So again, change needle at the beginning of the beginning of each new embroidery, or after 4 to 6 hours, or 50 to 70,000 stitches. Up to you. And then I put a little note in here. If you do not want to change the needle that often, which is highly recommended for beautiful embroidery, you can listen to the stitching. So there you go. So hopefully that'll help you with some needle questions. So I'm just going to check here, make sure I don't have any questions. Okay. Where do I get these? Oh, wait, let me start up here. Oh, goodness, here we go. You said the blue tint found it. It doesn't have to be printed on. So you're saying you use the lift with pre-wounds? Sheely, I think that's how you say it. Only with class L. Only with class L bobbins, not with class 15, but with class L bobbins are you going to use that bobbin pin. Where do I get these? Let's see. Is the best place to purchase baby lock bobbins at the local dealer, or is there a good place to get them online? Good question. So you always want to support your local dealer if they have them. However, I would look for if you don't have someone near you, look for an authorized baby lock dealer. Or if you use Bernina bobbins, you find an authorized Bernina. Same thing for Juki, same thing for Husqvarna. Always use an authorized dealer. You know you're going to get the right bobbins for your machine. So that's a very good question. My dealer instructor said only to use embroidery needles when doing embroidery. But what about using metallic? Oh, good question, Anne. We're going to get to thread in just a minute. I like that question. That's one of my favorite questions. Okay, let's see. I'm sorry I'm leaning off and on. It's just this is the only way I could get this to work, so. Okay. Ernestine, I'm going to get to that question in just a moment. And Dory says, I got pre-wounds when I bought my machine. How do I tell what kind it is? It should say on your packaging if it's either a class 15 or a class L, like love. And if it's a class 15, you do not need to use the pen. If it's a class L, you do need to use the pen. Good question. Okay, so we've gone through all that. Now let's talk about bobbin cases. And if you're not sure what a bobbin case is, if you're new to embroidery, and let me show you what a bobbin case is. Now, this comes with your machine. You don't have to worry about this, but some machines come with two bobbin cases. One for embroidery and one for sewing. The Solaris comes with one for embroidery and one for sewing, so does the Altair. The Meridian is only going to have one bobbin case because it's an embroidery only machine. And other baby lock machines are the same. Now, there will be a difference, and in your manual it'll tell you what the difference is. If you have a front loading bobbin, the little metal bobbins, or the bobbin case, then look in your manual, and if you got two bobbin cases, that means one of them's most likely going to be for embroidery, and it'll walk you through how to thread that. So yeah, I get that question all the time. Does it really matter if I change it to my embroidery case or my sewing? Yes, it does, because one of them is set for sewing tension, and that bobbin thread generally is going to be the same thread that you're using in the top of your machine. So if I'm using embroidery, I want the embroidery case for bobbin because that tension is set for embroidery bobbin thread. So you will get the best embroidery if you use the bobbin case. And so this is a drop-in bobbin, so you may have something similar to that, or you may have a front loading bobbin. If you have a front loading bobbin, it's generally going to be metal, and it may have some curlicues. It may have a little extra hook that you got to get through if you're going to do embroidery. So I think I saw a question. So Dory, it doesn't. Okay, Dory, real quick, are they paper or plastic? So Alexis asks, Altair has one for regular sewing and finishing touch. The other is for embroidery bobbin thread that isn't finishing touch. Yeah, you can use that one for just regular embroidery thread or finishing touch. You can use that bobbin case interchangeably with bobbin thread, and I would just make that your embroidery bobbin. So good question. And I'm getting to that. I'm going to get there, I promise. They're plastic. Okay, Dory, let's talk about this. It's a good question if you don't know. Okay, when I put my bobbin in, when you put your bobbin in, is it kind of flush, or is it sinking way deep down inside of the bobbin case? Because if it's sinking way deep down, that means it's really short. Or the other thing you can do is take one of your bobbins that came with your machine, take that pre-wound bobbin, put it up against it. If it's the same size, that's generally a class 15. If it's smaller, if it's shorter, then that is an L, and that's how you can tell. I'm sorry I don't have any here. Yes, the one that is generally for embroidery, and that's the bobbin case she's asking about, guys. So like my bobbin case right here has a dot on the inside. Now yours may have a dot, but it may be a different color. That's okay. All right, so let's go back to embroidery thread really quickly because I just had a great question. And I want to grab something that I didn't even think about when I was doing this class. So let me go grab it. I'll be right back. question. A lot of questions on this one. Question because now coming the holidays, we want to bring out that metallic thread, that gorgeous metallic thread, and embroider with it and sew with it. The tips I'm going to give you are same for embroidery and sewing. So I've got my metallic thread here, this beautiful silver. I have multiple colors. I love it. It's just so, oh, it's so yummy. Okay, what do I do for metallic threads? Well, let me give you a couple tips. The first thing you're going to do is, a lot of machines come with these. If not, you can buy these. They're super cheap. This is a thread net. So you might see something inside of your accessory pack that looks like this. And when I first got it, I was like, well, is this a wrist accessory? What is this thing? I don't know what this is, when I was first sewing. But now I know it's very important use. So if you have, if you're using a silk thread or something that's really slippery, or even a monofilament, which is clear thread, you want to use this, but you especially want to use it on metallic threads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thread and hold a strand of it out like this, and I have my thread net on my hand like this, and I'm going to reach in and grab that top, or that strand of thread, while this sits over the thread. What's going to happen is that's going to keep it from spooling off too quickly. So now when it pulls off, it's going to be nice and encapsulated, and it's not going to spool off too quickly. Okay, number one. And when you get these thread nets, what I like to do is cut them down to size. Some people push them all the way through and then fan them out. For some reason, I cannot figure that process out because I'm a little bit dyslexic. So I was like, I'm just going to cut it. The next thing you need, absolutely, we are going to change it up just a little bit. Now, I said earlier, when you're doing embroidery, you have to use an embroidery needle. But for metallic thread, I want you to use a metallic needle. And you could use like a 70, 75, something like that. An 80 is probably fine, metallic needle. And the difference is, with regular needles, there is nothing inside of the eye of the needle. So when this metallic thread is running through it, you've tried this, have you had a lot of breakage? That's because there is nothing inside of the eye of the needle to cool it down. It's getting really, really hot, and this is metallic. So you're getting hot, this is getting hot, and it snaps. So what you want to use is a metallic needle because it has a Teflon coating inside of the eye of the needle. So a metallic needle, because it has Teflon inside of the eye of the needle, that keeps this cool and keeps it from snapping. The last thing, so 3 things: thread net, metallic needle, and I'm going to get you, if I hear about you doing this, do not sew fast. What you need to do is, if you're doing embroidery, is turn that speed way down. It could be 300, it could be 600, it could be something, but do not sew at a high speed. If you're sewing with it, take your speed lever and turn it all the way down and go slow with it. That's really going to help, and it's going to be so successful and so gorgeous. So you guys who asked that, great a question. If we are doing freestanding lace, which bobbin case should we use? You want to definitely use your embroidery bobbin case. Which one is which? Cindy, I'm not quite sure the question. As long as machine. Okay, as long as it is a class 15 bobbin from another brand. Donna asked, can we use a class 15 from another brand? Sorry for the look on my face, but I have to always think about this because I always prefer to have the supplies that go with the machine, because for these class 15 bobbins that are baby locks, they are perfectly weighted and perfectly sized for your machine. And so I'm just not quite sure. You may have success with it, but I'm just not quite sure they are weighted or sized for your machine. But if you have them, try them. If you have success, awesome. If you don't, you may want to go back to the baby lock ones. So thanks for asking that. That's actually a really good question. Do I recommend a thread stand with using metallics? I've done it both ways. So since I have the thread net on there, that's really helping. So it's not necessary. But if you want to, sure, absolutely. Mini sewers to use sewer's aid on the thread. I have not used on my machine. It is so expensive. I have heard about sewer's aid, never used it. And because especially with metallics, number one, I don't want to put anything else in my machine, meaning I don't want any substance coming off inside of my machine, and that's a substance. So I don't want to use, Anna doesn't want to use that. But if you follow those steps for metallics or even for tricky threads, you should have success. But that's a good question. Let's see, pink dot versus green dot. Pink dot versus green dot, it depends on what machines you have. Tell me what machine you have, Jenny. Which bobbin case is which? Cindy, so if you have, which machine, tell me what machine you have. It also helps if you can move your metallic thread farther away from the machine if the thread has time to unkink before it gets there. Absolutely. After I embroider with metallic needle for about 6 minutes, the thread breaks. Slow it down. Put a thread net. Slow it down. Slow, slow, slow. Jenny Solaris. Okay, the purple dot or purple pink dot is for embroidery. Which thread spool holder do I use especially for metallic? I can use both, or since I have everything set up the way that I want it, meaning those 3 steps, that thread net, that metallic needle, and I slow my speed down, I can do it vertical or horizontal. I haven't had problems with that. Cindy Altair. Oh, so the bobbin, I'm trying to remember what's in the center of the, okay, the bobbin case that has a dot in the center of it, that is going to be your embroidery. I can't remember if it's like an orangey color. So yeah. Okay. Good question. You guys got some awesome questions. I love questions. All right. So, okay, so now I'm going to jump on to the next section. Purple, okay, that's the purple one is the, is the embroidery. Do you have to use embroidery thread in the bobbin? Or, oh, I'm sorry, guys. I should have mentioned that, right, when I was talking about bobbins? Okay, let's jump back up to bobbins and thread. So, when I was talking about embroidery thread a few moments ago bobbin thread for your bobbin, I said you need to use a bobbin thread, right? Well, what if you're doing a freestanding lace and you need the other side to be the exact same color? Can you wind your embroidery thread in there? Yeah. And I'm sure someone's going to ask this, I don't have to change the tensions on my machine. I actually never touch tension. Tension to me is a foreign, scary word. I don't change the tensions on anything in my machines. If I feel like there's a tension issue, what I do is I start with my first 3 steps. I go and first rethread the top, rethread the bobbin, and change the needle. If I'm still having issues after that, I call up my technician, or I talk to them at the shop. And they'll usually say, okay, well, bring me your bobbin case and let me check your bobbin case, and da-da-da-da, and I let them do that. I don't ever touch a tension button on the top of my machine. Ever. Ever, 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 ever. It's just not something that I'm comfortable doing. And so, yeah. So anyways, So yes, you want to use, if you want to make freestanding lace or you want the back to look as good as the top on your embroidery, you can use the embroidery thread. Yeah, just wind it on a bobbin and have fun. Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Now, can I use cotton thread for embroidery? Well, we just went through that class, or I just had a private class with the bowl cozies, and the ladies who were in my class actually helped me out with this. And they said, yeah, Anna, you can use cotton thread on your embroidery part. And I said, oh, I can? Awesome. So we stitched out our koozies, or I'm sorry, our bowl cozies with cotton thread, and they came out gorgeous. So can you use it? Yeah, you can use it. It's just general we want to use the other threads. So have fun with it. So Edward, yeah, there's your question. Thanks for asking that. Absolutely. Black for Altair. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's move on here. Now the next thing for successful embroidery is a design, obviously. And if you buy a design off of the internet or Etsy or Juju Designs or Embroidery Library, or if you even get a design that is on a USB stick that you bought or a CD, you want to use the design that is made for your machine. And that comes into design format. Baby Lock and Brothers, they read a PES, so a Paul Elaine Stanley. If you have a Bernina, a newer Bernina, that's going to be an EXP, so Elaine X-Ray Peter. If you have a, I'm just going to throw some things out there, a Janome, it is a JEF, so that's a Jim, Elaine, Frank. I'm just making up names. And then Singer, I can't remember what the Singer one is. Maybe an XXX. Husqvarna. That might be an HUS. So Hot Eunice Stanley. So there's different types that your machine will read. So you definitely want to use that format to bring it over to your machine. Now this next little wording right below that is for the baby locks. So if you save a design off of the machine that is not a Solaris, it will save in a PHC, and that means you can move it between different baby locks. Those of you who have a Solaris, if you save it to a USB, it's now going to become something called a PHX, and you can only open that. You can't move it from machine to machine, but you can open it up in the palette software, which is the embroidery software. So any questions on that? That's just super quick. I just wanted to spit that out for you guys super quickly, just in case. Okay, so my next thing on the list is hoops. Hoops are amazing. We need these. We need the hoops in order to do embroidery. Because what happens with the hoop, and let me grab one, is no matter what machine you're going to have something to hold your fabric and your stabilizer. And it'll have some kind of connecting mechanism on the side. So you may click yours in, you may slide yours in, you may snap yours in. It just depends on the machine itself. And generally with a hoop, what you have is you have two pieces. You have the bottom hoop, and then you have the top hoop, which if you came from a world of hand sewing is backwards. Because in hand sewing, the second hoop out here is your top hoop, and this part is your bottom hoop. So I remember when I was first embroidering, I just couldn't figure it out. I kept hooping it basically upside down, and I was like, what am I doing wrong? Finally someone said, you're not hand sewing, this is embroidery, machine embroidery. And I'm like, oh, okay, I feel stupid. But so when you put the material in, You're going to lay your material right on top and then place your inner hoop in and put it on and tighten it. Now let's talk about tightening. What you never want to do is you want to get your hoop kind of tight before you even, so when you pull it off of here, you don't want it super loose. Because what can happen is your embroidery can be loose. Or I'm sorry, your fabric can be too loose for the embroidery and you'll get puckers. But what you don't want to do, you don't ever want to go ahead and hoop everything and then let me get that back together. There we go. You don't want to take and then pull your fabrics. Never pull your fabrics, because what you're doing is you're stretching the fibers. And then when you release the fabric out of the hoop, what's going to happen? Those fibers are going to relax, and that's going to cause puckering. So try to get the hoop as tight as possible before having to go and pull that. The other thing you can do is once you get your fabric in, you can turn it over to the back and use your thumbs right here on the side and give it a baby bit of a push. Just a baby bit of a push on each corner. Baby bit of a push. Baby bit. And that's going to help tighten it up a little bit too. So hoops can range from any size. They can come from 1 inch to I think the Baby Locks, it's 1.5 by 2 inches, something like that, all the way up to 16 inches. And that depends on which machine you have. Now, unfortunately, those big hoops, sometimes we can't put them on the smaller machines because the machine is not made for that. The embroidery arm, which if we're looking at our machine here, this is our embroidery arm. Our embroidery arm cannot be big enough for all of it. So if you want to do a really large design, you may have to do a split design. And you can get that done in software, or you can buy designs that are split. Or you can buy designs that you have to re-hoop, which are actually really easy to do because a lot of the design companies out there make it super, super easy for you to rehoop it by adding registration marks. So that's a whole nother class, but you know, hoops are important. So let's see if I put anything else with that. Some hoops come with grids, which are so wonderful when using them for placement. I've never used the 4x4 grid. First time for everything. I do like to use this so when I mark my fabric, I can make sure that when I hoop the fabric that I can use my grid and make sure I get it centered. So if you can see the grid behind there. What's the most used size hoop? 5x7, the most used. Now, what I use the most of is, I love my 9.5 by 9.5 inch hoop. I love that hoop. But I do a lot of quilting stuff. But the 5x7 is probably the most used. How do I feel about dime monster hoops? I've never used one, but I've heard great things about it. And magnetic hoops are great too. The Baby Lock has now come out with one for the Solaris, but Dime makes magnetic hoops for, I think, almost all machines. I could be wrong, but I think they do. Those are really cool. Really, really cool. How do you store your hoops and grids? Great idea. Okay, so Dory, let me show you. My grids I keep in a folder. I have them all in a folder and I have them in a drawer so I can just slip them in. But my hoops, this is how I store my hoops. You ready? Dun, 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 dun. I need to get a second one. So let's see if you can see that. Let me come over here and get in a little closer. and look at my messy area. Okay, so what this is, let's zoom in a little bit. What this is this is made specifically to hang hoops. And I got this through Sew Steady, S-E-W, Steady, S-T-E-A-D-Y, on their website. They are an amazing company that makes quilt rollers, but what they have is an embroidery hoop holder. So let me take some of these down so you can see it. I really need a second one, but I can fit all my hoops on there. And how many hoops do I have on there? 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9 hoops hanging on there. And what they have is they have these little step downs. Done. And my husband just came in and screwed it into the wall because I can't get anything equal and level, so he has to do that stuff for me. And I can fit, depending on what hoops you have, I can fit 3 hoops on each ring, which I think is so super cool. I love that. Now some people take and do like a grid wall, and they use little hooks to hold, and that's actually genius. But this was so inexpensive. I think it was maybe less than $25, and it is great. I love it. It is my favorite thing, one of my favorite things in the sewing room, because it keeps my hoops away. For years I kept my hoops in a big plastic drawer, or I have those plastic bins, you know, that have drawers, and I kept them in there. And what was so hard was always this one was at the bottom, or this one was at the bottom. Now, what you have to do on some of them is pick these up to get it. But I mean, what do I care? I mean, it's an extra little step. So, but I really, really like it, and it has held up good. I've had it for maybe about 6 months, and I love it. And I really do need a second one, because I do have 9 hoops on there, which I probably only should have like half that. But it holds up well. I like it. Good question. All right, so just checking here, making sure that we're back on plan. Let me get back to my comments, just in case. You are welcome. Thank you. Oh, my necklace is turning, huh? Where are you going? Okay. So the foreman decided to wake up. She is up now and just staring off into the distance. So, okay. So the next thing I want to go over is stabilizers. Yeah, stabilizers. Eek! Stabilizers are the most important part of your embroidery, besides the thread and the needles and the bobbin, and the hoops and everything else. But in order to have a beautiful embroidery, a pucker-free embroidery, stabilizers are the one thing you really want to invest in, and invest in the right ones. There are a lot of inexpensive ones, but remember, those are mass-produced and they're not well researched. So there are some other stabilizers. The other side of that there are stabilizers, they may be pricey, but those companies, again, take the time to do the research to make sure that your embroidery is beautiful every single time. And not all stabilizers are made the same. Some are sprayed, meaning that the whole material is actually sprayed. And we'll talk about that when we look at tearaways. Some are combed. Some are made with polyester. Some are made with other materials. Other materials. So it just depends. And I know a lot of us are on a budget, but if I really do suggest a really good brand of stabilizers. So let's talk about stabilizers. So there are many to choose from. Stabilizers should always be used when doing embroidery. Of course, we know that, right? Well, if you can, the best thing to start out with is a stabilizer sample. And keep this by you at all times when you're embroidering. And what this is going to do is give you an idea of what stabilizers are available. And you can kind of decide off of there what you're going to use for what project. Well, how do you know? Well, there's a lot of guides out there that you can get. Some of them even have some information on the card itself or the sample packet itself to tell you what goes where. I do know a great source. There's a couple great sources for finding out what embroidery or what stabilizers to use for what embroidery. So the Floriani brand or RNK, they are one of the top makers of embroidery, and they are kind of mom and pop owned, and they're made by Ricky and Kay, so RNK, but Floriani falls right underneath them. Those stabilizers are amazing because Kay has taken the time to do all the research. She's traveled around the world. She's done everything that she needed to do to find out what's going to work best for your embroidery. Because guess what? She's an embroiderer. Also, right under that as well is Embellish. Embellish is a line made by Hope Yoder. And that's the card I have right here. Same thing. Hope and Kay went in together and did so much research on different types of stabilizer because Hope does a lot of crafting, not just regular embroidery, but she does a lot of in the hoop projects and she does a lot of crafting. So she came up with a line of amazing stabilizers. Now these can only be found at retailers, so you would have to go on their website and find out where they're sold. I know at my shop we sell Floriani. So there's many different types of stabilizers, and since you kind of want to do your research on how the stabilizer is made, I again discourage buying off of the big A because you don't know what you're going to get. If you don't do a lot of embroidery, I understand that, you may just not want to spend that much on it, but think about it this way. If you don't do a lot of embroidery, it's going to last you a long, long, long time. So might as well just go ahead and get that really nice, fantastic stabilizer. Another stabilizer that I absolutely love is the Baby Lock stabilizers. The same premise. They're very well thought out, very well researched. So when we're looking at something like a tearaway, and I wish I had an example of what I was talking about, but I don't. But so tearaways, if they're inside, if you're buying a tearaway and you're not really sure of the company, what you can do is hold it up to the light, and if you can kind of not see through it, you don't want to see through it, but have you ever looked at something like a piece of paper or something, held it up, and there's like little chunks of white, basically? So if the item is sprayed, what happens is it spits out chunks of white, and these are chunks of the stabilizer. They're like little gross little nodules inside of the stabilizer. And when we're embroidering, what can happen is the embroidery is going to go in, and once it hits one of those little knots or those little spits of whatever it's called, the embroidery is not going to stitch out right there. So you might have a loop. But if you look at a piece of stabilizer and you can pretty much not see anything, it's completely smooth, that means it was combed. And when it's combed, that means everything is completely smooth and your embroidery is going to be that much better. So that's what I mean by sprayed and combed. So it's a lot of information. It's mostly because, I've been doing this for a long time. So I've dealt with all stabilizers. So I know for what works best for me, and it's just a suggestion for you. Okay, let me see something real quick because I saw something. Embroidery Library, Creative Kiwi, Sweet Pea Designs are all good. Yep, good sites. Where do you get a sample set? Good question. So you're going to get them from your dealer. And they may have to order you one. It just depends on what brand they sell. So if they sell OESD, they'll be able to get you an OESD one. If they sell Floriani, they'll be able to get you a Floriani one. If they sell Embellish, they'll be able to get you one like this that looks like this. Floriani has an app that explains and recommends stabilizers. There you go. Great. Thanks, Linda. Yeah, so there are apps out there made by the stabilizer companies, but also on Floriani's or R&K and Floriani's website, they explain their stabilizers as well. Now, for Embellish, there is a workbook. And I don't have it in my hot little hands yet because it's fairly new, but it's an embroidery stabilizer workbook that you can buy. And I think it's like under $20. And what it is Hope has broke down everything, meaning like, hey, you're gonna sew on fleece? Let me tell you how to sew on fleece. Hey, embroider on fleece. You're gonna embroider on a quilt square? Let me show you how to embroider on a quilt square. So she's one of the #1 people in embroidery right now. So you definitely want to listen to what she has to say. That's who I learned from, and I've learned a lot from her. So what types of stabilizer are out there? A million, but I'm going to go through them. So the first one is a tearaway. And my question always is when do I use a tearaway versus a cutaway? My very first answer always is, if you wear it, don't tear it. So if you're going to wear anything, don't tear it. But there is a little bit of a to that. But a tearaway is generally going to be used for almost everything. It adds a lot of stabilization underneath your project. I use it when I'm doing towels. I use it when I'm stitching on a very high dense design on a quilt block, not on quilting, but the design on a quilt block. So let me grab my little geisha again. Where'd she go? She went right here. So actually with this, I hooped it with a no-show mesh, so a cutaway. But right before it started to stitch this little girl right here, I laid a piece of tearaway right up under the hoop. We call that floating. And that added extra stabilization to her, because see how many stitches she has? So you can use it as a floater. You can use it almost in anything. Now, a lot of times, if you're doing an in the hoop project, they call for a tearaway. I'm going to amend that and talk to you about that in a minute, because I don't like using tearaways in the hoop projects, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So, they come in a heavy, a medium, a lightweight. They even come where they are 50% washable, which means half of the fibers are going to stay under the embroidery design and the other half are going to wash out. That is my all-time favorite tearaway, because half of it's going to wash away, but half of it's going to stay in, and I think that's genius. So let's see if they're okay. Couldn't find the Floriani. Do you know the name of it? No, I don't, Kathy, but we can get we can find that out. Okay, sorry. Okay, I'm gonna zoom up really quickly. Woo, y'all got busy with questions there. Thank you. Have you ever used iron-on stabilizer? I haven't gotten there yet, Ernestine. I'm getting there. What's her name again? I'm not sure who you're talking about. Oh, this is cool, Colleen. Thank you. Dime makes an embroidery compass. It's a wheel for which stabilizer and needle for different. Ooh, I want one of those. That's cool. An embroidery compass. I need one of them. Okay. One of the embroidery design companies has an info area for sewing and different materials. Okay, cool. Like that. Let's see. Can you show what you mean by float? Yeah, in just a moment when I go, I'm going to show y'all how to hoop and all that, so I'll do that. So, Hope Yoder, HOPEYODER. Okay. All right, so now that brings me to fusibles. So there is such a thing as a fusible stabilizer, and they are made in a tearaway and a cutaway. So a tearaway fusible I may want to use if I'm going to embroider cotton. That way it keeps the fabric from shifting when I'm embroidering. Because sometimes, when you're embroidering a lightweight material, you may want to, like a linen or or something like that, a cotton material, you want to fuse it because that's going to help it stay in place. But generally what you want to be careful of is you want to use a medium iron when you fuse them. You don't want to use a hot iron. You're just fusing it enough to set onto the stabilizer, but you don't want to fuse it forever because you're going to tear that away eventually. So yeah, fusibles are great. And so a tearaway generally just means that. It means, where's it at? That after I use it, I am going to tear it away. And you want to be very careful when you're tearing away anything from an embroidery design. You don't want to just rip it out of the hoop. I see that all the time and it makes me cringe. I'm like, you're stretching the stitches. Oh my God, I'm going to die. Flip over the design and gently start removing it away from the design. That's the safest way to do it. Okay, so what's next? Do we have cutaways? Let's look here. Oh, wait. I mentioned, not only do they come in fusibles, they come in stickies. And let's talk about a sticky tearaway. I'm just going to tear off a little piece right here so we can see this. So what a sticky tearaway is for hooping the unhoopable. And what that means is hooping things like plush towels or blankets or something like that, where you cannot put that top hoop down on it. So basically you use this in the hoop, and it has a paper topping, it has a smooth back, but when I remove the paper topping, this is sticky. So this is sticky, so you can stick your embroidery down onto it. And what's really great about that is it really, really saves time. Now, do I float on top of the hoop a lot? No, I'm a hooper. But when I don't have to hoop, or when I can't hoop, I definitely do that. I see a lot of people who like to just float their fabric over the hoop and just stitch it down, and that involves usually I see a lot of puckering when that comes on. So if you don't have to float it on top, then I suggest hooping. Okay, so cutaway. If you wear it, don't tear it. Cutaways are made to be soft, especially against the skin. They add a lot of stabilization. They're really, really great for clothing. And which one to use for clothing? It just depends. It depends on what the design is. It depends on how many stitches the design has. If it has over 10 to 20,000 stitches, you may want a medium weight. But mostly I use what's called a no-show mesh. And it looks like this. Let me find it in here. Now, each brand is going to call it something different. This Hope calls hers a soft cutaway, and in general it's called a no-show mesh. So you can kind of see through it there. It's really soft and pliable. One of my favorite cutaways. I love using this, and I use this a lot. And since I'm more of a quilter, what I use it in is on my quilt blocks. So this is a baby mini quilt, and see how soft and pliable it is? So all this was done in the hoop. So the embroidery design and the quilting was all done in the hoop. Very soft and pliable. I did not use any tearaway on that. But I also use batting in this too. So you can use batting and quilt right through. in the hoop projects. So this is what I was mentioning earlier. An in the hoop project is something that you can make fully in the hoop. You don't have to get out your sewing machine. So basically, if I flip this inside out, this is a mug rug that we made in the hoop. Okay. So this whole thing was made in the hoop. So basically, we stitch out this part. We put these two pieces down. It stitches these two pieces down, and then we can take and flip inside out the project, and it's done. Now you can do in the hoop bags, in the hoop everything. There are so many in the hoop projects that it's not even funny. They're so much fun. And with me, I like to design my own in my machine. So a lot of designers will tell you to use tearaway when you're making your in the hoop projects. I'm going to ask you to at least try once using that no-show mesh. You're going to see a big difference. What you're going to see is your project doesn't crinkle. I don't hear tearaway in there. And it's really soft and pliable. That's what I love about the cutaway when I use in the hoop project, or when I make in the hoop projects. It does come in a fusible, and it does come in a sticky. So it's really awesome. So let's see if we have any questions. Thank you, Alexis. Yeah, Jacqueline, me too, girl. You know it. Woo woo. When quilting on a dream quilt panel, do you need stabilizer? Ooh, good question. I got mine right here. I'll go over that. Can we see the back of my mini? Actually, I just put a blank back on it. I didn't quilt the back, but I'll show you something. I didn't go all the way through for that one. Let me show you about quilting in the hoop on my Dream Big panel. So Dream Big panel is basically, it's made by Hoffman. And they have these gorgeous panels here. And the big flowers. Okay? Now, what we do with our IQ Designer built into our machines is we can scan this in and put quilting wherever we want, right? So, did I use any stabilizer? Nope. What I did, and that's a very good question, because at first when I started doing this, I'm like, well, should I put stabilizer? No, I don't need stabilizer, because you're going to use just like a regular quilt. You're going to have your top fabric, you're going to have your batting, and then you're going to have your bottom fabric. You layer those three together and then you hoop them. So you can see on the back, which I need to clean up very badly, the quilting came all the way through. Isn't that fun? I think this is I am so proud of this, and I don't want to hang it because I pull it out so much. I really want to hang it. But I pull it out so much as a sample that I can't even, But yeah, that is quilting in the hoop using IQ Designer and a Dream Big panel. And they have multiple out there. So yes, you can quilt in the hoop, but no, I would not use stabilizer. I would just hoop the 3 layers just like normal, like you're going to do a normal quilt. So good question. Okay, here's some things. What is the name of the no-show mesh? Kathy, it's so Floriani, I think it is called no-show mesh. We have, I can't remember off the top of my head. We have it at the store though. Okay. Thank you. If you were monogramming and a finished quilt, would you use stabilizer? Janet, good question. You know what I would use? Yes, I would. If it's already finished, you still, especially if it's a monogram, because it's, going to be some dense stitching, I would I would probably use a sticky tearaway, or, because you really can't hoop it, and then go ahead and stitch it, but you would probably want to use the matching bobbin thread. On the bottom, excuse me. And that way it'll look really nice on the back. So, and then you can tear away all the other the stabilizers so that it won't be there early or later. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. What stabilizer do we use on t-shirts? Okay, so I haven't gotten there yet, so I'm gonna get there. We're just going through the line of stabilizers right now. So Marilyn says on her mesh, she irons her mesh with steam to shrink it just a little bit. What is the name of your store, and how do we order from it? Well, we do not have an online store, so we are a very small little quilt shop in Tallahassee, Florida, and it's called Bernina Connection. So you can always call up there, ask for me, and I can help you get what you need, and we ship. And our shipping's actually pretty reasonable, so the owner doesn't really charge that much to ship. Okay. So let's move on. So that is cutaways in a nutshell. Our next one will be washaways. Ooh, those are fun. So washaways are basically what they say. They wash away after the stitching. They're there to add support, and they do wash away, but you got to know that if we think about it, it doesn't all wash away. There's a little bit that's going to stay in there because it's basically kind of like a glue and adhesive, so it's going to stay in there to add some strength regardless. So perfect for in the hoop lace, so lace projects, for freestanding lace projects, for freestanding embroidery like my little guys right here. These were stitched on organza. Let's see what else. You can use, I personally don't, but I know a lot of people who do. When I do embroidery on very plush towels or even on tea towels, I personally use a tearaway. That's what works for me. But I know one of my friends, she only uses a wash away, and it works great for her. So that is, is something that you'll want to test for yourself and see what works best for you. Which one do you like better? So washaways, we use them for a few different reasons. Now, like this right here, I used as a wash away stabilizer. All of this was a wash away stabilizer. So it was actually a sticky wash away. So it's on a towel. Remember how I said I normally use tearaway? But for this, I had to stitch these on and make them hang off. If I had used a tearaway, I wouldn't have been able to get these clean edges right here. So it had to be a wash away. So it really just depends on what you're working on and the way you want the finished look to come out. The other thing that I love to talk about is toppers. What in the world is a topper? Well, okay, so let me think about what Hope said the other day. She used a great analogy, and for some reason I can't remember it right now. But basically, what a topper is used for is to add a spacer in between the material and the thread. And why would you want that? Well, let's think about this. Have you ever embroidered on a very plush towel, go to wash it, and then the embroidery kind of disappears? Or you get little pokies where the little nap of the towels comes back through the lettering. We've all done it. Doesn't look very pretty, does it? Well, that's because we didn't have a spacer in between the thread and the nap of the towel. Same thing with minky, or same thing with fleece. You want to have something there. Now, this is what I do for toppers. If I'm going to do anything that has a thick nap, like a bath towel, like minky blanket, a fleece flannel, something like that, I use a heat away topper. I do not use a wash away, because what happens when we get done with the towel. We wash the towel. And if I'm using a wash away topper, what's going to happen to that stabilizer or that topper? It's going to wash away. So what was the purpose of me putting it there? So if I want to make sure that the embroidery stays pretty throughout the life of the towel, then what I want to do is lay down a heat away topper. And it only heats away at only will heat away with like a very high iron. So it can go in the dryer. It's not hot enough to melt it away, and it just sits underneath the stitching. So once the stitching's done, I just rip away the excess, and there we go. You have a beautiful towel. Now, when would I use this? Right here. This is a wash away. Well, wash away can be used for a lot of things. You can use this for clothing. So you're just trying to create a spacer in between, let's say, a knit shirt. And have you ever embroidered on a knit shirt? And you know, it's so that sometimes the design is so small that it sinks down into the shirt. So what you can do is lay a piece of this down, and it's going to create that spacer. And even after it washes away, the thread has a memory. It's going to stay that way. It's going to remember that there was a spacer there at one time. So they're really good to use. I use them on a lot of things, on a lot of embroidery that I really want to look spectacular. I don't use it when I'm quilting in the hoop because it's a pain to get out. So I don't use it for that. Another thing I use it for is in the hoop projects, if I have something that I need to do a final stitch on. Let's say this right here. If the embroidery foot comes around here, let's see, comes around here, and then comes up to this point right here, what can happen? That foot can get caught in there. So I lay a piece of the topper on top, and it keeps it from catching on things. So you can use it to not catch on things as well. So let's see if there's any questions about toppers. How do I feel about heat away? It's one of my favorites. I love the heat away. I love it. So I use, someone's barking. I use both. Love them. So I think they're both great. Let me do something here. Close the door so you have to hear Miss Pris barking at nothing. So the next thing is, how do we embroider on specific items? And I got that earlier. Let me see what that question was. Now again, I'm not going to be able to go over everything, but there are so many great resources out there. And it was it a t-shirt or a t-shirt? What do I stabilize with a t-shirt quilt? Oh, I can't remember the question. Let me see this. Let me try to find it really quickly. What stabilizer do I use on t-shirts? So I would use the no-show mesh. And if it's a really dense design, let's go back to that little geisha, because she's really dense, and it's perfect design to show you that on. Okay, so this is considered a dense design. There's just a lot of stitching. And so if I were going to put that on my shirt, what I would do is I personally would fuse a piece of the fusible no-show mesh. Bigger, it's going to be a few inches bigger than my hoop. I would hoop that. For this design, I would take a piece of tearaway stabilizer and slide it under the hoop, and that way it's going to add a little extra stabilization. So what does that mean when I say that? So let me get something hooped here quickly, piece of fabric, and I'll show you what I mean. Grab some tearaway over here so I can show you. Dang it. All right. So I have gotten, you heard me say dang it because I cut something. So yes, Colleen, that is the 50-50 that was exactly what I was talking about with the 50-50 tearaway. Okay, does heat away stabilizer muck up the iron? No, it beads up. Beep, beep, beep. So you're just using the tip of the iron. Do not put that iron straight down on there. What you want to do is use the tip of the iron to get away any of the little excess. So let's see. Okay, all right. So let's say I was going to stitch my little geisha on here, and she has a lot of stitches. What I have is I have my fabric, and we're going to pretend this is t-shirt, okay? We're pretending I have my t-shirt hooped. So I've got my t-shirt hooped, and I've got my no-show mesh, and we're going to pretend that it's fused to it. So we're doing a lot of pretending today. So I'm going to put this on my hoop. I'm sorry, my machine. Let me slide this back on. So I'm going to slide my hoop onto my machine, and this is called floating under the hoop. I'm going to take this piece of tearaway. I'm going to lift up the hoop. Make sure, I think I need to turn it a little bit more for you. There we go. I'm going to take my hoop, lift it up, and place that piece of tearaway right underneath there, just like that. And then when it embroiders out, what's going to happen is it will be on the bottom. It'll be kind of stuck to it because of the embroidery. I'll flip it over, and I'll just gently take that piece tearaway away. I have extra stabilization, and but I still only used, really, I'm using this as a base and this as a base. So, and that this is that 50% that I was telling you about. This is 50% wash away, 50% tear away, or 50% stabilizer, 50% wash away. It's really cool stuff. So, and that is a embellished product that I absolutely love. So good question. That question was asked earlier about the floating and then about the t-shirts. Now, if you're going to make, the other cool thing about stabilizer is something called interfacing. I love interfacing. So if you're used to making clothing, you know that sometimes you use interfacing on clothing, but we can use it for embroidery. Well, what if I was embroidering cotton, and just like this cotton right here, and the design was super duper stitch intensive, over 1,000 stitches, over 100,000 stitches, or something just ridiculous. What I can do is take this type of material, it is fusible on one side and it's really soft on the other, and basically iron it to the back of the fabric. And what happens is it stops the fabric from stretching, and it will stay on for the whole life of the fabric. So you'll place this on the back of the fabric, then you will also use stabilizer, you still have to use stabilizer, and hoop it, and that's another way to stop puckering, especially if you're using a lightweight fabric like cotton. So you can always just take and, cut, the size just a little bit bigger than the size of the embroidery and fuse it to that area underneath before you embroider, and then hoop it with stabilizer. So this is really great. But also I use this for t-shirt quilts. I put this on the back of t-shirts when I'm making t-shirt quilts, and that keeps the t-shirts from stretching. It's really cool stuff. So this is an interfacing. There's many of them out there. I just happen to have a lot of embellish product. This is the embellish underlay, and she calls hers underlay. And then there's Pellon has a lot of interfacings out there, so I like the softer ones, but they make them, generally will make them in a bold, which holds more stitches, or just a regular. So it's just something nice to have in your embroidering repertoire. I use interfacing on the back of my mask. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people do that. So I could use the fusible mesh on the t-shirts, Bonnie. Absolutely. Okay, since we all have different embroidery machines, I'm really not going to go over all the functions on the machine. But you can always follow this at your leisure, because it's not about using the machine, it's more about the embroidery basics. But I do want to go over hooping with you guys, and so I'm going to take you over to my table, and we're going to just talk about proper hooping and how we can do different items. So yeah, so give me a second. I'm going to get you over there and get you set up. So if you need to take a break, here, let's do this, because I told y'all this would be kind of a long class. If you need to take a break, let's take about 5 minutes or so. Go get your coffee, go get your stuff, go get your snack, go to the potty, and we'll be right back. And I'm going to get set up for the next part. turn you around here. Get to see all the messiness. Okay. Have you hooped tearaway and then spray? Yeah. Janet, if you're listening, if you're here, yes, I have done that. I don't really do the quilt with tearaway. Well, it just depends. It depends on what part you're asking about. So if you can hear me, I don't have my thingy. Yes, you're gonna see a lot of mess if you can hear me. Back now. I just want to go over some simple things, just a couple of simple rules when hooping. So make sure I can see your questions here. Okay, so that may be out of frame a little bit, and I want to make sure we can see all that. I am using smaller hoops, and just excuse all this over here. So if I'm going to hoop something, and it doesn't really matter what you're hooping right now, if you're hooping cotton and a cutaway or cotton and a tearaway, or just something basic like this, like a piece of fabric, what I like to do, I do use 505 spray for some things. If I don't want to fuse it to the fabric, but I don't want the fabric to slip, I will use just a little bit of 505, and I mean just a little bit. And the great thing about 505 spray is it's the consistency of a post-it note, so I can take it and take this off and reposition. But it's not so sticky that it's going to gum up my needle. So I am a big fan of 505 spray, because I've used other sprays and they do gum up the needle, and I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I can mark my fabric. So you'll have your fabric marked somehow. You can use a chalk, you can use a blue water soluble pen, and that was way off, but that's okay, that's good actually. I don't mind that being off. You can use the heat erasable pens like the Frixons. And what I have now is a spot where I need the center of my design to be. If you have, and I just set it down, of course, and lost it, because that's how I roll, you guys. Just lost my grid. Let me just check one more spot, see if I threw it back where it belongs, because that would be novel, right? Well, that's okay. Here it is.